Well, with this being one of your first 5 adaptive reuse projects, what are your biggest takeaways?
Upfront planning. It's all upfront planning, the architectural side. And if you do that right, everything should fall into place.
Welcome to the alley at Latta Arcade, a 23,000 square foot historic gem in uptown Charlotte. Built in 1914, Latta Arcade is an iconic early 20th century landmark, originally housing cotton brokers and developers. Today, this 2-level Art Deco arcade is home to a vibrant mix of local restaurants, retail shops, and gathering space. Developer Edward Latta designed the arcade to be a European-inspired avenue, where people could stroll, shop, and dine under a skylit roof. Chicago-based North Pond Partners acquired the site in March of 2020 and is honoring the building's rich history while introducing modern updates, transforming it into a destination for chef-driven bites and new culinary experiences. Join us as we dive into how the alley is blending old-world charm with contemporary flair, and stick around for a look into Phase 2 as the alley defines the food and beverage scene in uptown Charlotte.
This is a historic structure. It's nationally registered and protected. It was built in 1914, originally for retail. And then, ironically, there's offices upstairs, architecture offices. Since its foundation, the actual architect that designed this place had their offices upstairs and did some other buildings in uptown.
Now you're up there.
Now I'm up there, yeah, exactly. So working with Rebel on, really trying to think about how this could be positioned. So we brought in Plaid Penguin, a branding agency, and the idea was to think about what this place is. So it's kind of a cut through. We kind of celebrated the idea of the alley, right? And so because it's an alley, thinking about some of the famous alleys around the world, thinking about how people eat around the world, we're thinking about this idea of chef-driven kind of street eats.
One thing that I want you to note as we are going through this video is how many people are actually involved in bringing this project together. We're talking with the architect here. We've also got the broker. We've got the local partner for the development firm here. They mentioned a marketing and branding company. And as you've heard me say many times on this channel before, commercial real estate is a team sport. No man is an island. And so the better people that you can surround yourself with, the better your project will be.
Everything here plays up onto kind of multiple different offerings. We're not thinking of it as a food hall, it's more of like individual food retail offerings. But from a branding standpoint, we wanted to have this common identity. So we came up with the idea of these globes, glow at night, activate in the day and night. It's got, a beautiful skylight above, natural light, and then bringing in some biophilia.
Yeah, I mean, it's very similar to the arcade in Nashville, and it's exactly what you think of when you think of those arcade indoor multi-story retail buildings from the early 1900s.
Right.
It's really cool to see that y'all are maintaining a lot of the original architecture.
We did actually look at the arcade in Nashville as its precedents, and there's a lot of these, in the U.S. It actually kind of was the precedent is Europe. The idea is that the elite could go and shop and go find the place they wanted to go to, but it became the prototype for the American mall. That's why we were kind of looking at how do we keep this history and its roots. We preserved a lot of the architecture that was here and tried to enhance it in a way that the branding and the identity of the place is holistic, but then each individual retailer has their own identity.
Looking back, it's actually pretty interesting to think about how the American Mall evolved out of these shorter alley-based projects. You could essentially walk through a building that was semi-open air and shop, whether it was raining or snowing or not. In my opinion, what the American Mall ended up getting wrong is that they moved further outside of downtown, surrounded themselves in a sea of parking lots, and made it way too big. I mean, how cool is this project with it only being about 23,000 square feet over 2 stories?
Can you imagine seeing this and saying, let's not do more of those, let's go create malls?
Well, the challenge, and especially in the retail world, is how do you make cool in glass and steel, anodized aluminum storefronts? This is marble, stone, it's got character to begin with. Yeah, exactly.
But it looks great.
Yeah.
Jeff, how'd you come across the alley and what got you guys interested in buying this building?
I work for North Pond Partners. We have different people on the investment team. I wasn't really involved with the initial acquisition. We acquired it right at the start of COVID, which obviously has changed Uptown dramatically, but it fits the thesis of ours, which is find the cool building that's underutilized that can be iconic. And so the thesis held. Acquiring it was really scary. COVID had just started. Everyone was working from home. You looked at it, still half office, but we ended up going through with the deal. Had a really tough couple of years, honestly, right? Like nobody was in Uptown. Just a lot of negative headwinds, but I think retail now in Uptown is probably the most underutilized asset class maybe in Charlotte.
Some of the things that we're talking about is, retail and some of these mixed-use developments has always been kind of an afterthought. Now it's becoming more of an amenity.
Yeah, I mean, what we've seen at Rebel, Uptown has had these extreme headwinds in a post-COVID environment. We are trying to attract these best-in-class local restaurateurs, likely are not going to have any ability to go build out a Class A kitchen. How do we get the dominoes to start falling in the direction that we want this project to go? And I think the answer was strategically invest in the first couple of deals. And so we went out and we found Dumpling Lady. They've long been the most successful food truck operator in Charlotte. We knew that the restaurant community would buy into this project if the caliber of Dumpling Lady were here.
When you're kicking off a redevelopment like this project, note how James is talking about going out and specifically finding the tenants that will help put your project onto the next level. They didn't just put a sign up. They didn't just hope for somebody to call or find their listing on a website. They actively went out and found the tenants that they felt were a perfect fit for this project. And that's one of the reasons why the arcade is crushing it today. And remember to stick around because we are going to be covering what they'll be doing in phase 2 of the project because they're not done yet.
It's oftentimes just going from 0 to 1, right? Like getting that first domino to fall, and then everything else kind of falls into place. That was why it was so nice having Chad on board, because I was able to say, hey, You Are Here Hospitality has already signed on. These guys are going. You guys should jump in.
That's actually the exact same strategy that I used when I converted a 6-bay car wash into 5 micro restaurants and a bar. I didn't just go through the project hoping that the right types of tenants would come along. As you see in the video, I talk about Chad Newton, who is the owner of You Are Here Hospitality, and he was the first person that I called to say, Chad, what do you think of this idea? And when he said, sign me up for a lease, commit me to a space, I knew that we were probably headed in the right direction.
For decades, developers were one-trick ponies. They wanted to do only office, or they only wanted to do retail, and that's how we killed a lot of our neighborhoods. And developers today have to be more dynamic. It's all mixed use. It's how do you engage the street front, but then also monetize the air above. People don't realize how much more work it is to redo this than it is to just tear it down and start new.
Work and cost, right? So people don't know what it really goes into building a restaurant. Each one of these places have hot and cold kitchens. The hot kitchens, you're looking at anywhere from $250,000 to build a hood infrastructure. 800 behind us is wood fired. So we've had to actually position the pizza oven to directly go up because there's second floor, we have restrooms. So the position of the pizza oven aligns with where it could ventilate. Dumpling Lady, we've got a brand new hood for their walk. That has to run in the outside of the service alley of the building up to the roof. But then that also made some of these spaces that had hoods pretty valuable. Second gen kitchen spaces in Uptown, pretty valuable space. We had to sort of balance with all the needs of the building, hot and cold. So there's poke, there's crisps, salads. And that's kind of like if you really think about planning where people want to eat, what they want to eat, it's got a mix of cold, sweet, coffee, daytime, nighttime. So it kind of works, but like if every one of them wanted to do wood fired here, this would be crazy. It'd be mayhem.
I'm curious, you guys acquire the building, you bring James in, and he says, we need to overhaul the entire thing. Let's redo this. What was going through y'all's minds when he kind of initially came forward with that idea?
I joined on this project probably 2 years in. It was right when Dumpling Lady was really coming to fruition. To your point, this is really James' story to tell. I've been along for the ride. He brought Brian to the table. Brian brought Plaid Penguin. It's kind of just turned into just a powerhouse of heavy hitters in the Charlotte F&B scene. And it's been incredible to be a part of and try to hold together. Just grateful to be part of it.
By the way, if you like adaptive reuse projects like this one that we're covering here at the arcade and you want to start doing these projects for yourself, but you don't really know where to get started, check out my CRE Accelerator Mastermind, where I'll teach you how to find, fund, and operate your first commercial property this year, whether you have money or not. So scan this QR code or check out the link to crecentral.com in the description below.
James, it sounds like you've assembled pretty much the entire team, from the architecture to the tenants to the marketing and branding. Will you talk about how you kind of come up with the direction in which you want to take some of these projects?
The urban retail space in Charlotte's a pretty small sandbox that, a handful of us play in. So you naturally know everybody who's doing the most work and who's the most effective in their role, frankly. So Adam and I have been friends with Brian for years, and we've bothered him over many beers about the idea of working under one roof with us. There's a handful of people who are like-minded in terms of bringing really quality retail retail and want to work on these projects that are hairy and you're not frankly going to make a ton of money on, but they're adding what we think is immense value to the community. And at the end of the day, if I can get my bills paid and, look back on my career and think we moved the needle in terms of like quality of life in Charlotte, that's pretty cool.
It's interesting to think about doing a commercial real estate investment that may not make a ton of money. And I want to take a second to address what James said there, because I've got projects that are like that we didn't do it because it was going to have a 5x equity multiple by the time that we exited. We did it to prove a point or to prove a thesis. Right? And funny enough, the Wash is actually that type of project for us. And the reason that I'll do projects like that in East Nashville is because I own properties all around the Wash. Which means even though that project may not be insanely profitable, that doesn't mean that it doesn't contribute to the value of my other properties that surround it. So that's a pretty interesting portfolio approach that you could take if you decide to start investing within specific neighborhoods.
We're trying to figure out what the formula is, and the formula is not that difficult, but it takes a few pieces. And I think the party that's not at the table here is Plaid Penguin. What we needed to do first was make sure this has a POV, make sure that the guest understands what this is, from naming to communications to obviously the branding that was executed. It was like we're all aligned in one direction. And it took commitment from North Pond and from the leasing side to say, it could have been easy to land some of these deals that didn't fit the equation.
Yeah, we turned down plenty of prospects who could have gotten us occupancy during the hardest times of this project when we were like going through the pandemic and immediate post-pandemic. But we fortunately had established what we believed the brand to be, the commitment that everybody on the development team made to one another. It was not the easiest process, but it was the right thing to do.
I think there's a pride thing here, especially in the alley, because it's like all these vendors are kind of locally grown concepts.
That's how the leasing process took place here. It was not as much of a targeted brokerage exercise as it was just having local relationships with talented sous chefs who are coming up through the industry. I mean, it really starts with being a customer first and having relationships with these restaurateurs. Once there's some relationship established, you can start to have this dialogue and they'll understand the vision for the project. But really, it took establishing those relationships and then collectively our group having some salesmanship to say, hey, this is our vision and this is how we're going to execute on it.
James proves right there why it's so important to build the right team as an investor or developer, because when North Pond Partners came into Charlotte, this was their first project there. They didn't have the contacts, they didn't have the relationships to be able to do something like this, but James and Rebel did. So that's why it's so crucial to make sure that you spend the time curating who you're going to surround yourself with and who's going to help you pull this project together. Because finding the right broker or finding the right architect or maybe the right contractor could completely change the outcome of a deal.
What did the alley look like before y'all came in and started doing everything?
This was more like an editing process. It was kind of like taking away the things that weren't necessary and then figuring out what we needed to put back. Because the building's historic, we couldn't do these holistic changes, but a lot of it was sort of revealing what was already here. Some of the things that we added were these globes. We look back in some of the historic photos in the 50s, they had globes at one time. So there's sort of harking to the past, but also looking to the future.
What's the redevelopment process been like?
I've never done an adaptive reuse project myself before, and I've done 5 now at the same time. So I've really, learned a lot. It all starts with the right architect, honestly. Everyone loves to blame the GC when things go wrong, but the upfront planning is the name of the game. There's always building risk, right? But you can eliminate most of that by just good planning. The big surprise here was the sewer lines. They're the wrong size running through the whole building. And then we have a historic building where the floor in the middle is historic. So you can't just trench through the middle of the building and add a new sewer line. So we literally had to get CTAC permits all the way down through every food stall.
It was like the only time in 110 years that those floors have been opened up. And it was like, we got to open it up, put the sewer lines in, and then close it back up. To his point, like if you want to know what this project's involved, go to the basement and go to the roof. You'll see exactly what's involved. So.
What did y'all acquire the building for?
Probably $7 to $8 million, because that was, that's a time when leverage was easier to get at 70, 75%.
Yeah.
Now it's, if you can get non-recourse at 60%, take it and run. We're going to put $2 million into it and take rents from 30 triple net to 100 gross. And so like if everything goes to plan, right, we took a $7 or $8 million asset and created an $18 million asset.
So far, with the lease up, are you hitting your pro forma?
Yeah, I think the value we've unlocked from doing this process has helped us hit the underwriting from acquisition. I look at it as when we put this plan together, what the returns were and where they are now, and we are on budget. I think the one thing that's really helped us here is we have the office tenants upstairs and we have Chipotle and Potbelly, right? So we're covering our debt. We're not contributing money to the property.
Were Chipotle and Potbelly here when you guys acquired the property?
Yes, they were.
Did that credit help you guys secure the loan? That's one thing that I've found to always be a big pain point when we're doing micro deals is banks don't tend to like the small business credit. And so I would imagine having Chipotle and Potbelly was a huge boon for them.
Yeah, I think that was, and I think, where we're honestly very fortunate, we're a big, massive fund. This fund is a $130 million fund, this property. And we just have an established track record. Financing is hard for everybody right now, but when we were acquiring properties with our track record of real estate results and just the financial might of North Pond, we were able to secure debt pretty easily.
So what's next? I mean, we kicked Brian out of his office. We turned this into a bar.
Yeah, the hot take is phase 2 retail upstairs.
I think it's figuring out the common areas on the first floor. We have all these best of breed operators that want to be open longer hours. I think we have an incredible opportunity with just how Uptown functions. Basically, lunch dies at 2. Everyone goes back to work from 4 p.m. onward. A lot of traffic again. And it's how do we reposition the common areas, almost like turning a restaurant from this lunch crowd to this evening crowd. We actually have people on site that can do it because we have porters here all day. But that's the in-between phase before we kind of figure out what to do with the second floor.
The center has operated as a Monday through Friday lunchtime destination. So most of these tenants have just been open 11 a.m. to 2 p.m. So when North Pond acquired it, the idea was, how can we go back, let this be somewhat of a clean slate and start from scratch? And the pandemic proved to be an opportunity for that. So we lost some of our tenants naturally and had a lot of vacant space, and we decided we were going to be very targeted in our approach with the idea that we were going to expand hours beyond lunch and weekdays. We wanted to be active on the nights and weekends and make this kind of a all day, all week destination for people to have a culinary experience, whatever they were looking for. The previous restaurant tenants have always done extremely well here. We're seeing $2,000+ a square foot in sales from some of these groups.
Wow.
Just operating 3 hours a day on weekdays by natural daytime lunch traffic. We think Uptown is getting into a position and getting ready to hit this inflection point as far as night and weekend traffic goes. You're starting to think about alcohol service, breakfast on the weekend, all these different types of uses that might lend to a different crowd other than the daytime office lunch crowd.
You got to have the courage, right? Like the idea of expanding the hours and dealing with security and opening up this building, the conviction and doing what's right for the property as opposed to what you want the property to be within a safe space is a testament to these guys and pushing me.
Sometimes you just have to listen to the space and let it tell you what it's going to become. Love what the guys are doing with the arcade at Latta Alley. If you are enjoying adaptive reuse and you want to dive into another project that James and Rebel were involved in Charlotte, check out this video here on their pickleball facility.